Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about psi research in the Soviet Union. Our guest is Larissa Vilenskaya, who's been engaged in parapsychological research for more than 15 years. She is a Soviet-trained engineer and a successful participant in numerous psychic experiments. She began her work in 1967 in the Soviet Union and continues her research today in the United States, where she's lived since 1981. She knows many Eastern Bloc psi researchers and participants personally and has translated dozens of Soviet research papers into English. Larissa Vilenskaya is the editor of Psi Research, an East-West parapsychological journal. She recently became interested in firewalking, a very old phenomenon which we hope to touch on lightly today. What kind of research is being conducted in the Soviet Union?
There have been a number of interesting studies. I started to participate in research of so-called skin vision or eyeless sight. In early 60s, Soviet press began to write about woman Rosa Kuleshova, who reported that she could see with her fingers, with her eyes closed, that she could identify colors, drawings, even read a large type. And when I met her in 1970, she explained that she learned how to do this. She worked at a school for blind. She saw how they were reading Braille type with their fingers. And she had this strange idea, I don't know from where she had it, that if they can read Braille with their fingers, she can learn to read ordinary type. She began to train herself. She spent some time every day trying to identify large letters and words. In 3 months, she was successful. She began to demonstrate her ability to scientists. And when I worked with her, I clearly saw that really, without any tricks, she could identify drawings. She could identify colors when color samples were covered with several layers of opaque paper. She could do really interesting things. And when she showed me this and told I learned to do this, I thought maybe other people can also learn to do this. It would be very interesting to know, especially to help the blind. I started a training group at the Laboratory for Bioinformation in Moscow. There were 10 girls in their early and middle 20s who participated as volunteers in the group. In few months, 3 of them were extremely successful. They identified colors and drawings, approaching their hand or at some distance, or even samples placed in an opaque box. Others demonstrated some degree of this perception, and everyone achieved at least something during just 3-4 months training once a week. Therefore, I believe that every one of us have this latent capacity in the realm which we call psychic or psi or parapsychological. Only if we don't use it, we are not aware of it very often. Like everyone can learn to make a simple drawing, and not everyone will be a good artist. In the same way, all of us can learn to practice our psi abilities. Maybe not everyone will be at an excellent level.
Were there any outside indications that these 3 young women who became more proficient than the others in doing this reading with their fingers, was there anything that you could tell about them from their backgrounds, their height, their weight, their hair color, eye color, anything else?
Well, I don't think that there is any correlation with their weight or hair color or eye color. But first, all three of them were very enthusiastic about learning this and developing this ability. All of them were very open-minded when they started the training. They didn't tell themselves that it's impossible, and they perceived the task like a big challenge for them. And I believe that the greater challenge is the greater assurance of success. Maybe this is true not only for psi phenomena, but I observed this over and over again participating in experiments in psi. In Russia, I began to study healing, what we call psychic healing. It was laying on of hands and working with energies which are emitted from the body and connect us with the environment. People who practice healing, and there are many such people in Russia, believe that a primary cause for the majority of disease and disorders it's disturbance, disequilibrium in the energy exchange between the body and the environment. This exchange goes on through acupuncture points, through nervous centers, which yogis call chakras. And being in this training group, I found that in the same way, people who never thought that they could become healers, that they can help themselves and others, were able to do this. I don't think that some specific traits or qualities are necessary to learn something from this realm. And I saw many people. I conduct some classes now. Just a month ago, I came back from Europe. I helped people to train their healing abilities. And people from different backgrounds, different interests, different psychological characteristics, they're capable of doing this.
It's a question of motivation, you think? A
I
will
think,
to succeed?
Motivation is very important, and what is important, I emphasize already. If you say yourself that I can't do this, it's non-existent, or it's a property of only very special individuals, quote-unquote psychics, then if you say to yourself, I can't, then you can't. If you say I can, and it's in many other kinds of activities, then you can. You can just to acquire some skill, to learn something, to find an appropriate state of mind. But this is technique.
What about the experiments that we've heard a little bit about, long-distance mind control?
Well, some Soviet official circles are interested in experiments in distant hypnosis, for example. It started in 1920s when Professor Leonid Vasilyev conducted his tests in distant hypnosis at as long distances and 2,000 miles between the hypnotist and the person he tried to hypnotize at a distance or wake up at a distance. Some of these experiments, as far as I know, continue until recent time. Well, I don't think that it's the best way of using our ability to connect, I don't want to use the word influence, the surrounding world. Because everyone who works in this field understands that we all are really interconnected, and the distances, the borders between countries are not obstacles for this connection. Therefore, people who work in the field are very reluctant to talk seriously about mind control and other similar applications, because it's like boomerang. It comes back to the person who started it, and it's not superstition, it's reality. Therefore, I believe that most of my Soviet colleagues and my former colleagues understand this reality and will not go further into any kind of mind control experiments.
What about remote viewing?
Well, it's a very interesting way to receive new knowledge about reality. I first read about successful experiments in remote viewing conducted by Helputkov and Russell Targ here in the United States. I read about this when I was in Russia, and even translated the main paper in IEEE journal for Soviet edition of IEEE. I thought that our experiments in skin vision, when we moved from identification of samples really close and then went to doing the same when the samples were in another room, for example, it was a gradual way from this quote-unquote skin vision to remote viewing. Later, when Russell Targ traveled to the Soviet Union, he became acquainted with experiments conducted in Soviet city Yerevan in Central Asia, and they were very successful in applying remote viewing, in experimenting with this, and this is a very promising trend in psi research.
In remote viewing, there are obviously some very positive practical applications, and there are some cloak and dagger applications too, for lack of a better way of expressing it, some military or political applications. Obviously, if the research carries forward, some implications will be positive for the research and some will be negative. Maybe like atomic research, there are some wonderful things that have been done with the atom and the study of the atom, and some awful things that are related. How, as a scientist, do you feel about research into remote viewing that might have negative political implications?
Well, I think that, of course, you are quite right. Each and every scientific discovery has two sides, positive and negative. And the most innovative and the discovery is, the more potential application is possible, the more vivid are both sides, positive and negative. But I believe that satellite technology allows the military receive maybe more information about another country than potential for information gathering, which is inherent in remote viewing. Therefore, I believe that the positive potential enhancing our perceptual abilities, working with physicians for diagnosis, for example, we call it internal remote viewing, and doing all kinds of things. This positive potential, it's much more important than the possible application of remote viewing for intelligence gathering or something like this, which is discussed in the media lately.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, if it exists, it doesn't mean that we should stop all studies and applications of remote viewing. Like we don't stop use atomic energy for peaceful purposes because atomic bombs exist. Well, it's our reality, the world in which we live.
You spent a good portion of your life studying these phenomena. I wonder if you have a clue as to where the energy force comes from. Where does it emanate from that allows people to do skin viewing, to read things with their hands, to be able to do remote viewing, to be able to move objects physically?
Yes, about speaking about moving objects, I worked for a long time with Nina Kulagina in Leningrad, a very interesting lady who is able to move objects at a distance without touching them, who is able to remotely produce a burn on human skin, who is able to heal too. And of course, it's the most intriguing question what's all about, what the nature of this. And I conducted some of my own studies. I know other studies by Soviet researchers, Western researchers. And the real answer is we don't know as yet. We have some assumptions. We know that the human body emits a wide range of radiations, for example, electromagnetic waves or in various ranges of the spectrum, and they were measured and recorded by physicists. We know also that some multidimensional models are possible. What we can say now, contrary to the popular opinion, what we observe in remote viewing or any other psi experiments doesn't contradict scientific laws, but it just shows that we don't know all the laws of nature, that we can't say, as some physicists said at the beginning of the century, that physics is completed and science is completed, and we don't need will not find any drastic revelations, any drastic discoveries. We will just add some small things, and the building of science has been constructed already. Then Einstein showed that it's not true. His discoveries change our worldview completely. And I believe what psi research lead us to new discoveries in physics and in science in general would be comparable with that done by Einstein.
There seems to be a parallel movement as more and more members of the scientific community are breaking down these rules and are accepting or at least investigating new areas in psi, for example. There seems to be a parallel spiritual movement that's going on, that more and more people are retreating from the hard, cold scientific world and going back to, or maybe going ahead to a more spiritualistic outlook, that there is a greater power that and an acceptance of the concept of God.
Well, I would like to draw your attention to one more scientific hypothesis first. 2 years ago, British scientist, biologist Rupert Sheldrake wrote his book, The New Science of Life, in which he developed his hypothesis of so-called morphogenetic field. In simplifying his complicated scientific terminology, it means the more people do something or recognize something, the easier for other people to do this and recognize this, because there is some kind of underlying field or reason or cause which show the same, as I said earlier, our global interconnectedness. Therefore, one reason I believe by more and more both scientists and others are becoming interested in this field in both its scientific and spiritual aspects, it's because it's becoming easier to comprehend and accept and exercise this as long as more people are involved. And I don't see a direct opposition between scientific approach and spiritual approach, because this is the same reality we live in. We can't say that we understand the world completely. And understanding that there is something in the universe, some forces that well, we don't understand them. And if this leads to strengthening of the belief in God, well, I think it's not so bad phenomenon.
We often, because of the political reality of the modern world, view the Soviet Union, and sometimes when we say that, we don't look just at a political entity, we look at all the people who live there as being a part of this impression that is often thrust upon us as being a hard, cold political type of people. The colleagues that you worked with, the people that you worked with in Psi research, are they a spiritual people?
Some of them are. It's difficult for them to show this openly because of the system, because of the official ideology, materialism, because of the all difficulties with the system imposes on the people of this country. For me, it was difficult to understand that Americans very often don't see the difference between the Soviet government and the system on one hand, and just simple people on the other hand. Well, as people, we are not different. We have almost the same problems, families, children, worries, and people with whom I worked maybe except some worries and fears about what the government will do to them, there are normal people who like their work and want to know more about the world where we all live. And some of them, like a close friend of mine, Barbara Ivanova, who lives in Moscow, have many difficulties in pursuing their independent studies because the government tends to control everything, and she wants to work independently, to teach healing, to help people, and to study this.
Are people, the common people, the average, everyday people in the Soviet Union, more psychic than people in the United States? Do they have more psi abilities because of their culture than Western peoples?
Well, it's difficult to say. We don't have real scientific studies. When I was in the Soviet Union, I conducted a survey. I sent some questionnaires to some universities, to some students, to different cities and towns in the Soviet Union. I received about 150 responses to it, and 1/3 of those who responded stated that they had something which can be viewed as psychic phenomena, like telepathy, precognition, healing instances, or something like this, at least once in their life. It's unselected people.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that at least people in the Soviet Union are more open to this phenomena. When I gave lectures and talks throughout the Soviet Union, I usually saw that people were eager to discuss this, wanted to know more. It's not much published about this, although studies are in progress in official institutions. And people are open and want to know. And this is the first condition to develop and manifest psychic abilities.
Will you hopefully do the same thing in the United States, to do some surveys here to see if people will come out and admit their experiences?
Well, maybe there were some surveys, but it's a pity that people tend to put sometimes sign of equality between psychic and non-scientific, and this sometimes stops me from going deeply into this. But maybe I am wrong, or it's changing.
What about firewalking? We said we would touch on it lightly. That is hot coals and hot rocks and things that are
No.
extremely high temperatures, and people... Is it a trick?
No trick. Something like 7 months ago, I was invited to a firewalking workshop in Portland, Oregon. The workshop was conducted by Tolly Burkan, B-U-R-K-A-N, an American who learned this art from his friend, who in her turn learned from a Tibetan. And after 3 hours of explaining why we can do this, he went outside where the fire was lit, leveled the embers, stepped on these hot coals, and walked very calmly with a great smile, and he was not burned. And he invited everyone to follow. After some hesitation, I thought, well, I have the same skin, the same flesh as he has. Therefore, why he can and I can't? He said that it's only fear which will prevent you from going there. If you believe that you will be not burned, then go. Well, I went. And it was wonderful experience. I didn't harm myself at all. I was happy and exhilarated. I understood that it's really something that everyone can do this. The temperature is really high. Since then, I participate in 11 other workshops like this and learned how to conduct these workshops myself. And at the last workshop, we had physicists measured this temperature by a sensitive pyrometer. It was 1230 degrees Fahrenheit. Therefore, it's hot. But the only condition is, if you believe that you can walk on this hot coal, then go.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening.